Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? This lecture is for Wednesday, May 20th, which will be the last day of this week. Ascension Thursday, Extension Friday, and Memorial Day are coming up. 5-day weekend, big news. Weather's looking great. Hope you're all doing well, hanging in there. Um, it's been a marathon since what was that, March 12th, I believe. We have been away from each other, and we only have about 15 days of school left. So we are at the end of that marathon and hoping that everybody finishes strong. I hope everybody's grades have improved and getting ready for the big push towards college come the fall. So let's get into this. Let me go full screen. All right, now the top of this slide says the word Ike. Now, Ike is the nickname of Dwight Eisenhower, who we first talked about with his military command during World War II. Now, this guy is a hero to people on the right and to people on the left. And it's kind of interesting about military people that turn politician is that they can have a very, very broad and general base for support because Democrats are going to look at Eisenhower as having led them and helped them during the war, and Republicans are going to look at Eisenhower as having led them and helped them during the war. So a successful military leader can really kind of bridge the gap between the parties. And this is what you're going to see here. So both parties want him to run as their candidate. Truman is done, okay? And Eisenhower is going to step up to the plate. I believe he was serving as the commander of NATO forces and also the president of Columbia University between the end of the war and his election in 1952. So he's got about a 7-year window there where he does serve the public, but he also steps into private life, and then they put him back out front for this new election. The Republicans are going to get Ike. All right. So Dwight Eisenhower will win 2 elections. He will be a Republican candidate and nominee. 1952 and 1956. He is going to win both of those elections against Adlai Stevenson. Nixon is going to use Nixon is going to be Eisenhower's vice president using his populist and anti-communist language. Now, if you remember from a few days ago, Nixon is going to start to raise his political profile by serving on that House on Un-American Affairs committee, which investigated communist spies and potential loyal versus disloyal people. The McCarthy hearings really come out of what Nixon did in those early days in the late 40s with the House on Un-American Affairs Committee. So, Eisenhower's kind of towing the line between needing Nixon's populist anti-communist rhetoric, but also is going to wind up being a critic of what McCarthy did and is doing throughout the 50s. So he's going to play both sides of the fence on that one. Now, the Republicans are going to lose Congress in 1954, but in 1956, Dwight Eisenhower will be the first president elected with neither house of Congress, which is a pretty odd thing. What the trend has been lately is that if a Republican wins in the election year or a Democrat, the opposite party typically takes over one or both chambers of the Congress in the next election. So, for example, Obama won in 2008. The Republicans took back the House, and I don't remember about the Senate, in 2010. Donald Trump wins in 2016, and the Democrats took back the House in 2018. So we've kind of been having that push and pull over the last 20 years, let's say. Now, he's going to start to win Democratic Southern states, which is going to continue that course for today's Republican South. So I've been showing you the maps of the political maps of 48, and now I'm going to show you 52 and 56, and you're going to start to see some more of that red popping up in the South to eventually today where we have mostly blue in the North and all red in that southeastern part of the United States. So let's take a look at it. All right. You already see, it's kind of crazy, right? If you look at the map today, to think that California, New York, Texas, Florida would all be the same color would be very, very difficult to, contemplate. New York and California are blue. Texas is pretty bleed red. And Florida can go either way, but it's more red than blue, I would say, at this current moment. So what you're seeing here is that the blue states, those are the states' rights heartland, the old slave South, and the heart of Jim Crow segregation. So what you can surmise by looking at this map is that the people in the blue states, and this one is even a little bit more red, okay? The people in the blue states, they're the ones that are fearful that whoever's in charge is going to make segregation illegal and change the Jim Crow South laws. They know which way the winds are blowing. Truman was on a pathway towards civil rights, and Eisenhower is going to back the civil rights movement as well. So we are going to see a number of presidents in a row that are calling for more civil rights for black people, the integration of schools. Remember, Truman already integrated the armed forces. So this blue that we see in this map and in this map, that's the last of it. That's the old guard that wants to keep white people with white people and black people as far away from those white people as possible. But if you look at this map, it's starting to shrink. Okay, assuming that not everybody in a red state here loves black people, but that they are not for the kind of lynching and segregation practices that is going on in those blue states. Okay. Now, Ike's administration, a mixed economy, the use of government regulation and spending to assist free enterprise. And that is a very different way of proposing economic policies than an FDR did. Now, of course, FDR is going to argue that it was a Great Depression, so he had to do it. But the idea of limited government giving more freedom to businesses, that is going to start to peak out during the administrations of Dwight Eisenhower. So he wants a mix. He wants sensible decision making, he wants workers protected, but he also doesn't want the government overstepping in their regulation, spending too much money. He wants to let business be business. All right? He's going to extend Social Security to agriculture workers. He's going to use government spending to promote productivity and boost employment through the private sector, more so than FDR with the New Deal and the alphabet soup agencies creating millions of federally sponsored jobs. That was only needed during the Great Depression. That is not needed at this point in time. So we have better economic times. We're not in war, so we're in a time of peace. So the government, Ike's government, is about, he called it dynamic conservatism. Okay, maintain the moral and value base of the country, let business grow, let people have their freedom. Let's enjoy the prosperity, let's enjoy the peace. Okay, the one big piece that he is going to build for infrastructure is going to be the interstate highway system. Now, we have all driven on the interstate highway system. If any of you have ever driven on the LIE, the Long Island Expressway, the 495, that is part of the interstate highway system. It's those blue signs with the little red outline, and typically odd numbers run north to south, and even numbers run east to west. Now, if you've ever driven out Route 80 towards Pennsylvania, if you've ever gone out to the Poconos, or you've ever driven out to Chicago, or maybe anybody's driven across the country, Route 80 goes from New York City to San Francisco. I-95, which is probably more likely that some of you have driven on. If anybody's ever visited grandparents down in Florida and spent those lovely 20-hour drives on I-95, driving up and down the east coast of the country, that's I-95, goes all the way from the tip of Maine down to Miami. All right? Now, there are going to be many different reasons why this thing is built, but the fear of the Cold War. Remember, people are convinced in this country that if an atomic weapon was just used a few years ago, it'll be used again. The rhetoric around communist Soviet Union versus democratic capitalist America, the fear, the paranoia, the McCarthy stuff, the Nixon stuff, who's a spy, who isn't a spy, who can we trust, who's loyal, all of these things are going to build that cauldron of fear. So it's a backdrop to everything, not everything, but a lot of things that the government is going to act on. So reason number one for the interstate highway system is if there ever was an attack in a city, how do you get the people out and how do you get the military and healthcare workers potentially in if you don't have major access roads that not only go in and out of the cities, but connect all of the major urban cities and areas of our country? All right. Now, On the economic side, this is going to blow up for this is going to help replace the antiquated railroad freight system, moving goods back and forth on railroad car in east to west or north to south direction. Now trucking, which is more efficient and faster than the old railroad system, that is going to be able to move things around this country much, much faster. So, and then if you look even more specifically, like without roads and the building of, let's say, an LIE, how difficult is it for Long Island to get into the city and for the city to get into Long Island? So you have suburban sprawl, you need roads. You have a growing economy and a growing amount of goods that people want to buy and a rising standard of living. In order to move those goods quicker and get it out to more people and increase revenue, you need roads. And in the backdrop of the Cold War, if there ever was an attack and you need to mobilize people or troops, you need roads. So it's a multi-billion-dollar project. 41,000 miles of interstate highway system will be built. And this is a picture of them building it. It's super wide highways. I mean, you got 3, 4, 5 lanes on each side, depending on where you are and what state you're in. And if you notice, like, there are spurs to the roads. So 495 is a little spur off of the 95 corridor. You get down towards Baltimore, you have 695, which is the Beltway loop around Baltimore. Again, that 95 means that it connects and loops back to and around 95. Then you get down to Washington, D.C., you have the 495. That's the Washington Beltway loop that runs around. Again, 95 is the main artery and these little offshoots. And I mean, you can see where most of the people live and where most of the cities are by where they built a lot of these roads. All right. And there's 80 going straight across from New York City all the way to San Francisco. You got Route 10 and Route 5 that come out of Southern California. Excuse me, Route 10 comes out of Southern California, dips down through Arizona, and then down across Texas, and then connects over through Louisiana. And then you have 40, which connects, again, Southern California, Arizona, through northern Texas and across to Atlanta. So you have your east to west routes, you have your north to south routes. Now, Ike and the Russians, all right? Now, it's funny because you got a military commander, right? He led the American and Allied troops from North Africa into Italy in 1942 and 1943. He is the top commander in that operation. Then he's the top commander in the Normandy invasion in 1944 and 1945. So this guy has seen the world. He has led huge coalition forces, worked with generals from different countries that were part of the Allied forces with us. All right. He is world traveled, weathered. He's a veteran. All right. He knows the deal. And you might think that he's all about war, but he's an older man at this point, and he's seen so much death and so much destruction that he doesn't think that war is a good thing. So does he want to be strong against communism and the Soviets? Absolutely. But he also wants to do it in a smart way. He doesn't want to escalate things. He believes in containment, but there are limits as to how far he will go to actually contain communism. All right. Now, he is going to end the fighting in Korea, which was one of his campaign promises. So that Korean War will come to an end. The U.S. is going to test a hydrogen bomb than the Soviets do. It's more powerful than the atomic bomb. So we are going to see an escalation as in terms of nuclear arsenal. Okay. Ike hates war. He sees it as a tragic waste. His Secretary of State, named John Dulles, and the airport down in D.C. is named after him. He is going to be considered his Cold Warrior. So he is going to task Dulles with making sure that Americans are safe from any sort of nuclear attack. He wants to let his department heads deal with their venues, their areas of expertise, not so much him. He looks at himself more as a manager. Massive retaliation. If the Soviets attacked any U.S. ally, we will attack them with nuclear weapons. The idea of brinkmanship, right? You're pushing each other closer to the edge. Every bomb that is tested, every new capability, new technology that the military has, pushes the other one to develop the same thing, but one step further. All right. So the idea of you're pushing yourself to the brink. And then that's what the 1950s, in terms of foreign policy, there was always this backdrop that the Soviets couldn't be trusted, that the Soviets were going to kill us, that the Soviets wanted to invade America and invade Europe and take over the world, and they would do whatever they needed to do in order to do that. And let me tell you, the same thing is going on inside of the Soviet Union. They are telling their people, the Americans want to take you over, the Americans and the British are going to invade us, they've already used a nuclear weapon once, they'll use it again. So each country is going to use a healthy amount of fear to be able to kind of manipulate their people and control them in certain ways. There are going to be bomb shelters built on people's properties underground. There are going to be school bomb drills where the kids would actually get under the desk at a certain point of a day, just like we have a fire drill or a active shooter drill. They are going to have nuclear bomb drills. And my parents, who were going to elementary and middle school in the 1950s, they remember this. They remember there being drills and a bell would ring and they would have to get under their desk. Now, I don't know what getting under a desk is going to do in the case of a nuclear attack. I never really understood that. But I guess it was, I don't know, preparedness, making parents feel better. But you could also make the argument that it kind of helped to solidify the fear that was out there. And you're also now, you're conditioning a whole nother generation of kids who are impressionable, right? I mean, these are young kids to now be fearful of the Soviets and be fearful of communism because, well, why do I have to get under my desk when that bell rings? The explanation was because the Soviets might be trying to hurt us in some way. All right. So that's, of course, going to breed a whole nother generation of people that are fearful of the Soviets and fearful of communism. And here are the young children underneath their desks. And then we have a do-it-yourself bomb shelter where people would stockpile food and you could live down there for a certain amount of time. Now, I don't know what you know about nuclear weapons, but it's not just the bomb blast that kills people. It's the radiation and the poison afterwards that soils the ground and everything. I mean, I know outside of Chernobyl, after they had the nuclear meltdown, that land couldn't be farmed properly for another 100 years after it. All right? But people are spending money on things like this. I know that there are certain schools. I know Walt Whitman High School. Actually, I don't know if it's Walt Whitman High School or it's Wantaw, either middle or high school. But their basements of some of these schools were actually built as bomb shelters in case the kids needed to go down there in the event of some sort of nuclear war. And that is Mr. Eisenhower, who actually lived in Gettysburg for a time. Now, this is our last slide for today, the origins of Vietnam. So we're going to be talking more about Vietnam over the next week or two. America really starts its diplomacy with Vietnam by kind of dipping their toe in the water. France had always controlled Vietnam. The Japanese are going to take Vietnam from French colonial control, but they're going to leave after 1945 because they're decimated. And France, to the dismay of the British and of the Americans, they want to try to keep their Asian empire. Remember that them and the British were always moving around the world, in this race for colonial possessions. But in 1947, the British are going to give India back to the Indians. And they don't want, they think that, and America does too, that by European powers keeping colonial control over certain areas, that it threatens the world and could kick up into another world war. So France wants to keep their empire, and they are going to wage a war against Ho Chi Minh's nationalist forces in Vietnam. The U.S. is going to refuse to send military when France faces defeat. So they kind of warn them not to get involved in Indochina area and Southeast Asia, to give it back to those countries, and let's see what happens in terms of communism and what the Soviets do. But Ho Chi Minh is going to take out the French, which kind of shows you how weak France was. I mean, this is a major world power that now can't defeat a growing, a very new coalition inside of Vietnam. Now, after that, we're going to get into this diplomatic game, if you will. We are going to back Go Din Diem in South Vietnam, because the North is going to start to push down into southern Vietnam. So you're going to have a situation in Vietnam where the North is communist and the South is democratic. And that's what the Vietnam War is going to be fought over. And each president that's going to come into power between Eisenhower and eventually Nixon is going to have more or less of an appetite for wanting to be involved in Vietnam, wanting to send more troops and more money. But this is the very, very early stages of this, okay? So we are going to back the South Vietnamese. So we are starting to get involved in Vietnam, but we are not full scale involved yet. But this is going to start to set the stage for the future conflict in Vietnam, which was a whole another set of problems for America, all right? So let us end there. Good. I'm only 20 minutes today. Nice and light. I will get this up for you guys on Edpuzzle for tomorrow, for Wednesday. If you owe me work, please get it in. I am not looking to reduce points on anybody that is late, but I do need the work. I'm 15 days away from having my grades be due, so please get moving on that. Some of you received emails from me today to that effect. If you want to know where you stand, please check in on Infinite Campus or shoot me an email, and we will talk it out. And I hope you guys are all doing well. And this will be, I guess, all you'll hear from me until Tuesday. So I hope you all enjoy the weekend. Get outside, run around, smile a little. You've earned it. And I hope you and your families are all well. Happy Memorial Day. And enjoy your barbecues. Later.